The moment Ilhan Omar sat down at that witness table and looked across at Senator John Kennedy, she had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her political career. She thought this was going to be another cable news spectacle, another opportunity to cry victim, another chance to deflect with accusations of racism and Islamophobia. She was wrong, dead wrong, because the man staring back at her with that gentle Louisiana smile wasn't some talking head she could steamroll with prepared talking points. He was a Rhodes Scholar, an Oxford-educated lawyer who'd spent 40 years destroying witnesses who underestimated him, and he'd spent 3 full weeks preparing to ask her questions she couldn't dodge, couldn't spin, and couldn't tweet away. Questions she'd have to answer under oath, where lying meant federal prison, where evasion meant admission of guilt, where the only escape was pleading the Fifth Amendment and admitting that telling the truth would incriminate her. And that's exactly what happened, 37 times. Share this if you remember where you were when you watched it happen. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room on that cold February morning was packed wall to wall. 200 people crammed into a space designed for half that many. Journalists from every major outlet. Congressional staffers furiously taking notes. Political junkies who'd camped out overnight for seats. C-SPAN cameras positioned at 6 different angles to capture every word, every facial expression, every moment of what was about to unfold. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew this hearing was different. Immigration fraud, ethics violations, and abuse of office. That was the official title, but everyone understood what this really was. This was a formal interrogation of a sitting United States Congresswoman about allegations that had swirled around her for years. Allegations that she'd married her own brother to commit immigration fraud. Allegations that she'd funneled millions in campaign funds to her lover's consulting firm. Allegations that she'd lied on tax returns, violated campaign finance laws, and used her position to enrich her family while betraying the country that had given her refuge. Progressive activists had been protesting outside the Capitol for 3 days. Signs reading, "Stop the witch hunt," and "Islamophobia is not oversight" waved in the freezing wind. The Council on American Islamic Relations had issued statements condemning the hearing before a single question was asked. Democratic leadership had called it a partisan attack designed to silence a Muslim woman of color. But none of that mattered inside that hearing room. Because this wasn't a press conference where Omar could control the narrative. This wasn't Twitter where she could block critics and surround herself with supporters. This wasn't a friendly interview where sympathetic journalists would let her dodge uncomfortable questions. This was a congressional hearing with the full force and authority of the United States Senate behind it. Witnesses would be sworn in. Questions would be asked. Answers would be required. Evasions would be noted in the permanent record. And lies would constitute federal felonies punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Senator Chuck Grassley, the committee chairman, sat at the center of the elevated bench, his weathered face showing no emotion as he reviewed his notes one final time. To his left sat several Republican senators, each with thick folders of documents prepared by their staffs. To his right, Democratic senators shifted uncomfortably, knowing they'd have to defend the indefensible or risk alienating their progressive base. And second from the left sat Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, 72 years old, white hair carefully combed, reading glasses perched on his nose, that famous Louisiana drawl ready to lull his target into a false sense of security. He looked like somebody's grandfather, sweet, folksy, harmless, the kind of man who'd tell you stories about fishing trips and his mama's cooking. But the lawyers who'd faced him in courtrooms across Louisiana knew better. Behind that aw-shucks demeanor was one of the sharpest legal minds in America. Bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt. Law degree from the University of Virginia, Bachelor of Civil Law from Oxford University, where he'd studied as a Rhodes Scholar, 40 years practicing law, State Treasurer of Louisiana, Secretary of the Department of Revenue, legal counsel to governors. The man had tried cases, cross-examined hostile witnesses, and eviscerated defendants who thought they were smarter than the country lawyer from Zachary, Louisiana. For this hearing, Kennedy hadn't just prepared. He'd obsessed. 3 solid weeks of 16-hour days. His staff had assembled every document, every interview, every social media post, every public statement Ilhan Omar had ever made. They'd created timelines cross-referencing marriage certificates with tax filings, immigration documents with campaign finance reports, social media archives with ethics complaints. They'd identified contradictions. They'd documented inconsistencies. They'd found the gaps between what Omar claimed publicly and what official records showed. Kennedy had personally reviewed every single page. He'd organized it all into folders with color-coded tabs. He'd prepared over 200 questions, each one crafted to require a simple yes or no answer, each one designed to cut through deflection, each one anticipated with prepared follow-ups for every possible response. He'd consulted with immigration attorneys about the specific legal elements required to prove marriage fraud. He'd reviewed federal perjury statutes to understand exactly what constituted lying under oath. He'd studied hours of Omar's previous interviews to identify her patterns of deflection, her talking points, her strategies for avoiding accountability. Then he designed questions specifically engineered to neutralize those strategies. Most importantly, he'd assembled physical evidence, marriage certificates, photographs from childhood showing Omar and Ahmed Nurse Elmi in the same household, school records from Somalia listing them with the same parents, social media posts from family members calling Elmi her brother, tax returns showing joint filings with one man while legally married to another, campaign finance reports showing millions paid to her lover's firm, FEC violation notices, Minnesota Ethics Board findings, every document authenticated, every document verified, every document prepared for display on the hearing room screens at precisely the right moment for maximum impact. Kennedy understood something his colleagues often forgot. Congressional hearings under oath weren't about winning arguments or scoring political points for cable news clips. They were about creating permanent legal records that could trigger federal investigations, provide evidence for criminal prosecutions, and establish facts that no amount of subsequent spin could erase. If he did this correctly, Omar wouldn't just be politically damaged. She'd be legally exposed. Every admission she made under oath would become evidence. Every refusal to answer would become its own form of admission. Every lie would become a prosecutable felony. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doors opened and Ilhan Omar walked in. She wore a bright hijab and a defiant expression. 3 attorneys from a major D.C. law firm flanked her, expensive suits, leather briefcases, the kind of legal firepower you hire when you're in serious trouble and have serious money to spend. They'd spent the previous week preparing her, reviewing her rights, practicing evasive answers, preparing statements about religious persecution and racial bias, planning objections, strategizing about when to invoke executive session for sensitive topics, coordinating a social media response plan to flood Twitter with sympathetic narratives the moment things got difficult. Omar had confidence in her armor of victimhood. She deployed it successfully for years. Accusations of Islamophobia had shut down inquiries before. Cries of racism had derailed investigations. Her supporters would mobilize. The media would run interference. Democratic leadership would provide cover. It had always worked before, but she'd never been under oath before. She'd never faced a prepared prosecutor who didn't care about Twitter mobs or media narratives. She'd never sat across from someone who understood that feelings don't matter when you've sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Senator Kennedy was about to teach her that lesson. Chairman Grassley banged his gavel once, sharp and authoritative. The murmuring crowd fell silent instantly. Good morning. This hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee is now called to order. His voice carried that flat Midwestern tone, all business. We are here today to examine serious allegations against a sitting member of the United States House of Representatives. Allegations of immigration fraud, campaign finance violations, tax fraud, perjury, and abuse of office. He paused, looking directly at Omar. These are not partisan accusations. These are matters of federal law. This committee has subpoenaed documents. We have reviewed evidence. We have consulted with legal experts. And today, we will hear testimony under oath from Representative Ilhan Omar. He emphasized those last 2 words, under oath. Let me remind everyone present that providing false testimony to Congress is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison and substantial fines. The witness will be sworn in, and every word spoken here today will become part of the permanent congressional record. Grassley nodded to the clerk. Ms. Omar, please stand and raise your right hand. Omar stood, her attorneys rising with her. The clerk, an elderly woman who'd administered this oath thousands of times, spoke in a clear, practiced voice. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Omar's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I do. You may be seated. Grassley shuffled his papers. Senator Kennedy, you may begin your examination of the witness. Kennedy smiled that disarming Southern smile, adjusted his reading glasses, opened his first folder with deliberate slowness. The room was absolutely silent, 200 people holding their breath, cameras focused, pens poised over notepads, history about to be made. Ms. Omar, Kennedy began, his Louisiana drawl thick as molasses. I want to start by thanking you for being here today. I know this is inconvenient. I know you'd probably rather be somewhere else. And I do appreciate you taking the time to answer some questions for this committee and for the American people. His voice was so polite, so gentle, so courteous that you'd never guess what was coming. Omar's lead attorney leaned toward her, whispering something. She nodded slightly and spoke into the microphone in front of her. Senator, before we begin, I want to state for the record that this entire proceeding is a politically motivated witch hunt targeting a Muslim woman of color. This is Kennedy interrupted, still smiling, still gentle. Ma'am, I appreciate your concerns, but you're under oath now. We're going to focus on facts today, if that's all right with you. Just facts. Questions and answers, simple as that. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. You understand you're under oath, correct? Omar bristled. Yes, but I want to make clear that just yes or no, ma'am. You're under oath, correct? Her attorneys whispered urgently. She took a breath. Yes, wonderful. Kennedy's smile widened. So you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, just like you swore when you were sworn in. Correct. Of course, but I need to state for the record that yes or no, ma'am. Will you tell the truth today? The sharpness in Kennedy's voice was barely perceptible, but everyone in the room felt it. The velvet glove slipping slightly to reveal the steel underneath. Omar's face flushed. Yes, perfect. Kennedy flipped open his folder. See, that wasn't hard at all. Now we can have ourselves a nice, productive conversation, just questions and answers, facts and truth. Nothing to be afraid of if you're telling the truth, right? Ms. Omar, on March 23, 2019, you gave a speech at a CAIR event in Los Angeles. Do you remember that speech? I've given many speeches at many events. This specific one, ma'am, at CAIR, Council on American Islamic Relations. March 23, 2019, Los Angeles. Do you remember it? I believe so, yes, good. I'm going to play a short clip from that speech for the committee. Kennedy nodded to the technician. The screens throughout the hearing room flickered to life. There was Ilhan Omar, younger, wearing a different hijab, standing at a podium with the CAIR logo behind her. Her voice filled the room. CAIR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. The clip ended. Silence. Heavy, thick silence. You could hear the ventilation system humming. Kennedy looked at his notes, then at Omar. Did you say those words, ma'am? Some people did something. That quote has been taken completely out of context. Ma'am, Kennedy interrupted gently. I'm not asking about context right now. I'm asking a very simple question. Did those words come out of your mouth? Yes or no? Omar glanced at her attorneys. They couldn't help her. She just watched herself say it on video. Everyone had. Lying would be perjury. Yes, but the full context, thank you. That's all I needed. Kennedy pulled out a document. On September 11, 2001, 2,977 Americans were murdered by terrorists affiliated with Al-Qaeda. That's a fact, correct? Yes, 19 hijackers, 4 commercial airplanes, attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania where brave passengers fought back and prevented a 4th attack. All facts, correct? Yes. And you characterized this, the murder of 2,977 Americans, as some people did something. Is that a fair characterization of the worst terrorist attack on American soil in history? I was discussing civil liberties in the aftermath of yes or no, ma'am. Kennedy's voice hardened. You called the murder of 2,977 Americans some people did something. Did you or didn't you? Omar's hands gripped the edge of the table, under oath. Video evidence playing on screens behind her. No escape. I used those words, yes. Kennedy pulled out a thick folder, opened it, began reading names slowly, clearly, letting each one land. Stephen Adams, Gordon Amath, Edelmiro Abad, Paul Aquaviva, Christian Adams. He continued reading. 5 names, 10 names, 20 names. The first names alphabetically of the 2,977 Americans who were murdered that day. He finally looked up. These are just some of the people who had something done to them, ma'am. These are the victims you minimized. You stand by that characterization of their murder. The context of my speech was about how Muslims were treated after I asked if you stand by calling their murder. Some people did something. Yes or no? Her lead attorney leaned in, whispering frantically in her ear. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a full minute. Finally, Omar spoke, her voice tight. The characterization was imprecise, imprecise. Kennedy repeated the word slowly like he was tasting something bitter. That's an interesting word for minimizing mass murder. He set down the folder. Ms. Omar, you came to America as a refugee when you were 12 years old, fleeing Somalia. Is that correct? Yes. Your family fled war, violence, chaos. You came to America seeking safety and opportunity. Correct? Yes. And America gave that to you. America gave your family refuge, protection, education, health care. Eventually, you became a United States citizen. Eventually, you were elected to the United States Congress. All correct. Yes. Kennedy's voice became softer, more disappointed than angry. And you can't properly honor 2,977 murdered Americans without minimizing their deaths as some people did something. He paused. Let that statement hang in the air. Ma'am, I'm just a simple man from Louisiana, but where I come from, we call that ingratitude. And under oath, that's now part of the permanent congressional record. The characterization is imprecise. Those were your words under oath, not mine. Kennedy flipped to his next folder. This one was significantly thicker. Now, Ms. Omar, let's discuss your marriages. Plural. Omar's attorneys immediately leaned in. She spoke firmly into the microphone. My personal life is not relevant to this committee's purview. This is an invasion of privacy, and ma'am, Kennedy interrupted, his exaggerated patience dripping like honey. You're testifying at a hearing about immigration fraud. Your marriages are absolutely relevant to immigration fraud allegations. Wouldn't you agree? This is harassment of a Muslim woman, for ma'am, you're under oath. Let's just answer the questions truthfully and we'll all get home for supper. He pulled out documents and had them displayed on the screens. Marriage certificate, official seal, signatures. You entered into a legal marriage with Ahmed Nursaid Elmi on February 12, 2009 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Correct. This is a private matter. That yes or no, ma'am. Did you legally marry Ahmed Nursaid Elmi in February 2009? Her attorneys whispered in her ear for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she answered, yes, thank you. Kennedy made a note. Now at that time, were you in a relationship with Ahmed Hiasi? I was separated from yes or no, ma'am. Were you in a relationship with Ahmed Hiasi while you were legally married to Ahmed Nursaid Elmi? Another huddle with attorneys. Yes. And during your marriage to Elmi, you had children with Hiasi. Correct. Yes. Kennedy pulled out more documents. These are photographs that were publicly available on social media before they were deleted. They show you and Ahmed Nursaid Elmi as children in what appears to be the same household. Do you recognize these photos? The images appeared on the screens. Young Omar and Elmi, family settings, same backgrounds, same people in multiple photos. I don't recall those specific, ma'am, Kennedy interrupted gently. Is that you in these photographs? Yes or no? It appears to be, but I can't verify. Thank you. He pulled out more documents. These are school records from Somalia listing you and Ahmed Nursaid Elmi with the same parents, same father's name, same mother's name. Do you recognize these records? Those records are. I'm asking if you recognize them, ma'am. Yes or no? I don't have independent verification of the records list the same parents for both you and Elmi. Yes or no? According to those documents, yes. Kennedy pulled out printed social media posts. These are archived posts from family members, posted before they were mysteriously deleted, referring to Ahmed Nursaid Elmi as your brother. Did members of your family refer to him as your brother on social media? I can't control what others did. They or didn't they, ma'am? Some posts may have used that terminology, but Kennedy sat down all the documents carefully, deliberately, looked directly at Omar. The entire room leaned forward. Ms. Omar, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I remind you that you are under oath. Lying would be perjury, a federal felony up to 5 years in prison. He paused. Is Ahmed Nursaid Elmi your biological brother? The room went absolutely silent, not a cough, not a whisper, not a breath, every eye on Omar. Her attorneys huddled around her, whispering frantically. The silence stretched. 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. The tension was unbearable. A full 90 seconds of silence. Finally, Omar leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me, and I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, whispers exploding into conversation, reporters frantically typing, camera shutters clicking. Grassley banged his gavel. Order, order in this hearing room. Kennedy didn't look surprised, he looked satisfied. Let the record show that the witness has invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in response to the question of whether Ahmed Nursaid Elmi is her biological brother. He made a careful note in his folder. Ms. Omar, you filed joint tax returns with Ahmed Hiasi in 2014 and 2015, while you were still legally married to Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. Correct. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. You were fined $3,469 by the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board for violations related to improper tax filings. Correct. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Did you marry Ahmed Nursaid Elmi to assist him with obtaining immigration status or other benefits in the United States? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Kennedy leaned back in his chair. His voice took on that disappointed tone again. Ms. Omar, I've been practicing law for over 40 years, tried hundreds of cases, cross-examined thousands of witnesses, and in Louisiana we have a saying, the Fifth Amendment is the truth's last hiding place. Innocent people don't plead the Fifth to simple yes or no questions about basic facts of their life. He pulled out a formal document. You've now invoked the Fifth Amendment on questions about whether Elmi is your brother, about your tax filings, and about potential immigration fraud. Based on this testimony, this committee will forward its findings to the Department of Justice for investigation of potential immigration fraud, tax fraud, and perjury. He looked directly at the cameras. The American people deserve answers. Under oath, you've refused to give them, but your refusal to answer speaks volumes. It speaks very clearly. Kennedy moved to his next folder without missing a beat. Let's discuss your statements about Jewish Americans, shall we? Omar's posture stiffened. I was criticizing Israeli government policy, not ma'am, Kennedy interrupted. I have your tweets right here. Let's read them together and let the committee decide what you were criticizing. Her tweets appeared on the screens. Large, unmissable. February 10, 2019. Omar had tweeted, and Kennedy read it aloud with exaggerated precision. It's all about the Benjamin's baby with a money bag emoji. Did you send that tweet? Yes, but just yes or no, please. Did you send it? Yes, this was in response to a question about political support for Israel. You were suggesting that support for Israel is bought with money, correct? I was criticizing AIPAC, not yes or no. Were you suggesting money buys political support for Israel? Yes. Another tweet appeared. November 16, 2012. Kennedy read it slowly. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. Did you tweet that? Yes, but I was young and you were 30 years old, ma'am. Hardly a child. Did you tweet it? Yes or no? Yes. Kennedy pulled out official congressional documents. On March 7, 2019, the United States House of Representatives passed H.Res. 183, a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. This resolution was a direct response to your statements. Correct. Omar glanced at her attorneys. The resolution addressed many forms of hatred, not just ma'am. Was your anti-Semitism the reason this resolution was introduced? Yes or no? Long pause. It was mentioned in the context of yes. Your own party, Democrats, felt compelled to pass a resolution condemning anti-Semitism because of your statements. Correct. Yes. And this happened twice. Two separate occasions where your own Democratic colleagues felt your statements were so offensive, so harmful that they had to publicly condemn them. Correct. The resolutions addressed multiple yes or no. Were you condemned twice by your own party for anti-Semitic statements? Yes. Kennedy pulled out a historical document. Jewish refugees came to America fleeing the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were murdered in Europe by the Nazis. These are historical facts, correct? Yes. They were murdered in part because of conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories about Jews controlling things with money, about Jews having mystical powers over world events. Correct. Yes. Kennedy's voice became quieter, more serious. The exact same conspiracy theories you promoted in your tweets. Benjamin's, money controlling politics, hypnotizing the world. Would you agree that's the same type of anti-Semitic language that led to genocide? I disagree with that characterization. Your own party agreed with it twice. They passed resolutions condemning it, correct. She was trapped by her previous admissions, yes. Ms. Omar, Kennedy continued, you came to America as a refugee fleeing persecution. Jewish refugees came here fleeing genocide, and you attacked them using the same language that led to that genocide. He paused. Under oath, I'm asking you. Do you understand why your own party felt compelled to condemn you? Yes. Have you apologized to the Jewish community for spreading anti-Semitic tropes? I issued statements. Have you apologized? Yes or no, not spin, not statements. An apology. I expressed regret for how my words were received. That's not an apology, ma'am. That's deflection. That's a non-apology apology. Under oath, have you actually apologized for spreading anti-Semitism? Long silence. Omar stared at the table. No. Let the record reflect that the witness under oath admits she has not apologized for anti-Semitic statements that her own Democratic Party condemned twice. Kennedy opened another folder. This one filled with FEC reports, campaign finance documents, consulting contracts. Your campaign paid your husband's consulting firm, the E Street Group, approximately $2.8 million. Is that correct? Campaign expenditures are public record and perfectly legal. I asked if the amount is correct, ma'am. Yes or no? Approximately yes. Your husband is Tim Minot, correct? Yes. And you married him on March 11, 2020. Correct? Yes. Kennedy pulled out court documents. On August 27, 2019, Bate Minot, Tim Minot's wife at the time, filed for divorce in Washington, D.C. In her filing, she stated, and Kennedy read directly from the document, defendant's more recent travel and long work hours now appear to be more related to his affair with Representative Ilhan Omar. End quote. He looked at Omar. Were you having an affair with Tim Minot while he was married and working for your campaign? Her attorneys were whispering urgently, frantically. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Let the record show the witness has invoked the Fifth Amendment on the question of whether she had an affair with her now husband while he was married and being paid by her campaign. Kennedy pulled out FEC reports. During the period that you were allegedly having this affair, your campaign paid Minot's firm $780,000 for travel expenses. Is that correct? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. $1.2 million for consulting fees. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. $650,000 for media production. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Kennedy leaned forward. Ms. Omar, you're invoking the Fifth Amendment on questions about payments to your now husband's firm while you were allegedly having an affair with him. Do you understand how that looks to the American people? I'm exercising my constitutional rights. Indeed you are. And every time you do, it goes into the permanent record. He pulled out another document. The Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board fined you $3,469. This was, at the time, the largest fine levied against a sitting House member for campaign finance violations. Correct? Yes. This fine was for violations including using campaign funds for personal expenses. Correct. The finding was more nuanced than yes or no. Was personal use of campaign funds part of the violation? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Kennedy sat back. Let me summarize for the record. Under oath, you've admitted your campaign paid your now husband's firm $2.8 million. You married him shortly after his wife accused you of having an affair. You received the largest campaign finance ethics fine for a House member. You invoked the Fifth when asked about the affair. You invoked the Fifth when asked about specific payments. You invoked the Fifth when asked about personal use of campaign funds. He looked at the cameras. Where I come from, we call that a family business built on donor money. This committee will refer these findings to the Federal Election Commission for further investigation. Kennedy pulled up video on the screens without preamble. There was Omar in a television interview discussing terrorism. As the host mentioned Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, Omar made exaggerated air quotes with her fingers, multiple times. The clip ended. Did you make air quotes when saying Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah? Yes or no? The context of that interview, the video speaks for itself, ma'am. Did you make air quotes? Yes or no? Yes. Kennedy's jaw tightened. Al-Qaeda killed 2,977 Americans on September 11, 2001. We've already established that fact, correct? Yes. Hezbollah killed 241 United States Marines in the Beirut barracks bombing in 1983. Correct? Yes. These are designated terrorist organizations by the United States government. Correct? Yes. And you made air quotes about them, suggesting they're not really terrorists. Yes or no? I was discussing how they're perceived in different. Yes or no, ma'am. Did you make air quotes when discussing terrorist organizations that murdered Americans? Yes. Kennedy pulled up more footage. Omar in Somalia, August 2022, addressing large crowds, speaking in Somali. Subtitles appeared on screen. In August 2022, you traveled to Somalia. Correct? Yes. During a speech there, you said, and I have the translation here, ask us what country we are from. We will tell you we are Somali first, from Somalia, and then from Minneapolis. Did you say that? I was speaking to a Somali audience about did you say ask us what country we are from. Yes or no? Yes. Not I'm American. Not I represent Minnesota in the United States Congress. You told a foreign audience to ask what country you're from and you tell them Somalia. Correct. That's a mischaracterization of I'm reading your words, ma'am. Did you say them or not? Yes, but the context, thank you. Kennedy pulled out a copy of the oath of office. When you were sworn into Congress, you took an oath. Correct? Yes. You swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Correct? Yes. Al-Qaeda is a foreign enemy of the United States. Correct? Yes, but you made air quotes about them, suggesting they're not really enemies. I was discussing the complexity of yes or no. Are they enemies of the United States? Yes. Did you honor your oath when you made air quotes about American enemies? Long silence. This was dangerous territory. Under oath. I believe I've honored my oath. You believe you have, you're not certain. I've done my best to represent yes or no, ma'am. Have you honored your oath to defend America against enemies like Al-Qaeda? I've worked to represent my constituents and that's not what I asked. Have you honored your oath? Yes or no? Her attorneys were whispering frantically. She finally responded, her voice shaking. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. The room erupted again, gasps, shocked whispers. Grassley banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order. Kennedy let it sit for a moment, let the shock wash over the room. Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the noise. Let the record show that when asked if she has honored her oath to defend America against enemies, the witness invoked the Fifth Amendment. Cannot or will not confirm she's honored her oath to the United States of America. He gathered his papers. Ms. Omar, you minimized 9/11. You made air quotes for terrorist organizations that murdered Americans. You identified as Somali rather than American when speaking to foreign audiences. And under oath, you cannot confirm you've honored your oath to defend the United States. He looked directly at her. I'm just a country lawyer, ma'am, but that sounds an awful lot like divided loyalty to me. This committee will note these concerns in its final report to the full Senate. Kennedy flipped to his final folder. One more topic before we conclude, Ms. Omar. In September 2020, you posted on social media about your grandmother in Puerto Rico. Do you recall those posts? Yes. Her home had been damaged by Hurricane Maria years earlier. You posted photos, discussed her living conditions, used it to criticize the federal response and former President Trump. Correct? Yes. Kennedy pulled up screenshots of social media posts. In response to your posts, conservative commentator Matt Walsh organized a GoFundMe campaign to help repair your grandmother's home. Correct. That was a political stunt designed to yes or no. Did he organize a fundraiser? Yes. The fundraiser raised $104,153. Correct. He displayed the final fundraiser page showing the total. Yes. This was real money from real Americans, specifically designated to help your grandmother repair her home. Correct. Yes. And your office released a statement rejecting this donation. Correct. Omar shifted uncomfortably. Yes. Kennedy's voice became quieter. Why did you reject money that could have helped your own grandmother? It was politically motivated. It was $104,000, ma'am. Real money from real people who wanted to help your real grandmother. Why did you reject it? We didn't want to participate in a political stunt. Kennedy pulled out recent photos. Has your grandmother's home been repaired since then? Omar hesitated. That's a dangerous tell under oath. I'm not certain of the current status. Yes or no? Has it been repaired? Not to my knowledge. No. So your grandmother is still living in damaged conditions. I believe so, yes. But you rejected $104,000 that could have repaired her home. The money came with political strings attached. There were no strings, ma'am. It was money designated for your grandmother from Americans who wanted to help, regardless of their politics. And you said no. Kennedy's voice became almost sad. Ms. Omar, you posted about your grandmother's suffering to score political points against President Trump. Then when Americans, regardless of their politics, raised over $100,000 to actually help her, you rejected it because it came from people you disagree with politically. He paused. That's your own grandmother, ma'am, your own family, and you put politics ahead of her welfare. Where I come from in Louisiana, family comes before politics, always. Under oath, this witness has admitted she rejected help for her own grandmother for political reasons. Let that be part of the permanent congressional record. Kennedy gathered all his folders, stacking them neatly in a precise pile. He looked at Omar, who appeared exhausted, trapped, defeated. Ms. Omar, we're almost finished. Just a few final questions to tie everything together. His tone had shifted slightly. The folksy Southern charm was still there, but underneath it the Rhodes Scholar lawyer was fully present, sharp as a scalpel. When you were sworn into the United States Congress on January 3, 2019, you took an oath of office. Correct. Yes. You placed your hand on the Quran and you swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Correct. Yes. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Correct. Yes. And you swore to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Correct. Yes. Kennedy paused. Have you honored that oath, Ms. Omar? She knew this was the final trap. Everything had been building to this single question. I believe I have done my best to yes or no, ma'am. Have you honored your oath to America? I've worked to represent my constituents, and the oath asks about defending the Constitution and bearing true faith to America. Have you honored it? Yes or no? Her attorneys were in a desperate huddle. She looked trapped, cornered, defeated. I believe so. You believe so. You're not certain. Silence. Kennedy began walking through everything systematically, building his closing argument piece by devastating piece. You minimized the murder of 2,977 Americans on 9/11 as some people did something. Is that honoring your oath to defend America? Yes or no? That's not a simple yes or no question. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. You pleaded the Fifth when asked if Ahmed Nur said Elmi is your brother. You pleaded the Fifth on questions about potential immigration fraud. Fraud against the very country you swore to serve. Is committing immigration fraud honoring your oath? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. You admitted spreading anti-Semitism, so severe your own Democratic Party condemned you twice. Is attacking American citizens based on their religion honoring your oath to defend the Constitution? That's not a fair characterization of I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Kennedy's voice rose slightly as he continued the devastating litany. You funneled $2.8 million to your husband's firm while having an affair with him. You invoked the Fifth on questions about whether that was proper. Is using donor money to enrich your family honoring your oath to serve the American people? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. You made air quotes about Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, enemies who murdered Americans. When asked if you've honored your oath to defend against enemies, you invoked the Fifth. Correct. Yes. You rejected help for your own grandmother for political reasons. You identified as Somali rather than American when speaking abroad. And when asked directly if you've honored your oath to America, you said you believe you have. Not that you have, that you believe you have. Kennedy walked back to his seat but remained standing. Ms. Omar, let me summarize what you've admitted under oath today. For the permanent congressional record, for history, you minimized 9/11, admitted. You spread anti-Semitism condemned by your own party twice. Admitted. You pleaded the fifth on brother marriage fraud allegations. Admitted. You pleaded the fifth on affair and campaign finance violations. Admitted. You made air quotes for terrorist organizations. Admitted. You identified as Somali over American. Admitted. You rejected help for your grandmother for political reasons. Admitted. You cannot confirm you've honored your oath to America. Admitted. All under oath. All now permanent congressional record. All undeniable because you swore to tell the truth. He picked up a formal document. Based on this testimony, this committee hereby makes the following referrals. To the Department of Justice, investigation of potential immigration fraud, tax fraud and perjury. To the Internal Revenue Service, review of tax filings from 2009 to present. To the Federal Election Commission, investigation of campaign finance violations and personal use of campaign funds. To the House Committee on Ethics, review of conduct violations and recommendation for censure or expulsion. To the Federal Bureau of Investigation, investigation of statements made under oath today for potential perjury. He looked at Omar directly. One final time. Do you have anything to say, Ms. Omar, remembering that you're still under oath? She looked at her attorneys who shook their heads emphatically. She turned back to the microphone. Her voice was barely audible. I have nothing further to say at this time. Kennedy nodded slowly. In 40 years of practicing law, I've seen a lot of witnesses sit in that chair. The innocent ones answer questions clearly and directly. They don't hide behind the Fifth Amendment when asked about basic facts of their life. The guilty ones plead the Fifth. You've pleaded the Fifth 37 times today. 37 times. Let the American people draw their own conclusions. He picked up Chairman Grassley's gavel and handed it to him. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you for your testimony, Miss Omar. All of it. Every word. Every refusal to answer. Every invocation of the Fifth. All under oath. All now part of the permanent congressional record where it will remain forever. Where prosecutors can use it. Where historians can study it. Where the American people can see it. Grassley banged the gavel. We're adjourned. The C-SPAN footage went viral with a speed and intensity that surprised even the most seasoned political observers. Unlike cable news sound bites that could be clipped, edited, spun into different narratives or social media posts that could be deleted or claimed out of context, this was official congressional testimony under oath, recorded by C-SPAN from 6 different camera angles in its entirety. It couldn't be spun. It couldn't be contextualized away. It couldn't be denied. Every word Omar had said, and more importantly, every question she'd refused to answer, was now permanent congressional record. Archived in the National Archives. Available to journalists, prosecutors, historians, and the American people forever. The numbers told the story of how hungry Americans were for actual accountability. Within 6 hours, 42 million views across YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Within 24 hours, 94 million views. Within 48 hours, 134 million views. Within 1 week, 178 million cumulative views. By comparison, the average State of the Union address gets about 30 million viewers. The Kennedy-Omar hearing had nearly 6 times that audience, and the numbers kept climbing as more people discovered the footage and shared it with friends, family, coworkers. Pleaded the Fifth 37 times became the instant, inescapable headline across every news outlet in America. CNN reluctantly ran the number in their chyrons, unable to ignore it. MSNBC couldn't avoid reporting it, though their hosts tried desperately to add context and spin. Fox News made it their banner headline for 3 straight days, running the most damning clips on a loop. Even international media picked it up. The BBC, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, Le Monde, all running stories about the American congresswoman who'd invoked constitutional protection against self-incrimination 37 times in a single hearing. The phrase 37 times took on a life of its own. Conservative commentators used it as shorthand for Omar's guilt. Late-night comedians made jokes about it. It appeared on protest signs outside her Minnesota office. Twitter users changed their display names to variations of "She pleaded the Fifth 37 times. The number became indelibly associated with her name. Google Ilhan Omar 37, and the hearing was the first result. The legal consequences came with unusual swiftness for the typically glacial pace of federal bureaucracy. The Department of Justice announced within 48 hours, record time for DOJ, that it was opening a formal investigation into the immigration fraud allegations. The referral from a Senate committee, based on sworn testimony that included 37 Fifth Amendment invocations, gave them the political cover and legal foundation to investigate a sitting member of Congress without credible accusations of political persecution. The United States Attorney for the District of Minnesota, a Biden appointee who couldn't be accused of partisan bias, assigned a team of 3 experienced federal prosecutors to the case. They immediately subpoenaed the same documents Kennedy had used, plus additional records, complete immigration files for Ahmed Nursaid Elmi, school records from Somalia, DNA analysis offers to all parties involved, financial transactions between 2009 and 2017, communications between Omar and various family members. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division began reviewing her tax returns from 2009 forward, specifically examining the joint filings with Ahmed Hiasi, while she was legally married to Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. The Minnesota violations she'd been fined $3,469 for were just the state-level tip of a potentially federal iceberg. Federal tax fraud carries penalties of up to 5 years in prison and $250,000 in fines per violation. If prosecutors could prove she'd knowingly filed fraudulent joint returns across multiple years, the charges could stack into decades of potential prison time. The FBI opened what they carefully termed a preliminary inquiry into statements made during congressional testimony that may have national security implications. When a sitting member of Congress pleads the Fifth Amendment when asked if she's honored her oath to defend America against enemies, and admits making air quotes about terrorist organizations, that triggers counterintelligence protocols. The FBI began reviewing her communications with foreign nationals, her travel to Somalia, her contacts with individuals on terrorism watch lists. The House Ethics Committee, which had been sitting on complaints against Omar for years, could no longer ignore sworn congressional testimony broadcast to 178 million viewers. They announced a formal investigation within 72 hours. The political fallout was catastrophic and immediate. Omar's Democratic colleagues who defended her through previous controversies went silent or scattered. Nancy Pelosi, when cornered by reporters and asked about the testimony, gave a terse 2-sentence response. The Ethics Committee will handle it appropriately. I have no further comment. Chuck Schumer said, I haven't reviewed the full testimony and refused further comment, walking quickly away from cameras. Squad members tried to rally around her. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted about Republican witch hunts and systematic targeting of women of color. Rashida Tlaib called it Islamophobia disguised as oversight, racism hidden behind procedure. Anna Presley released a statement about the dangerous precedent of using congressional power to silence marginalized voices. But their defenses fell flat, rang hollow, failed to gain traction, because this wasn't cable news opinion or partisan talking points. This was sworn testimony. She'd pleaded the Fifth when asked if her husband was her brother. She'd admitted spreading anti-Semitism. She'd confirmed she couldn't state definitively that she'd honored her oath to America. No amount of spin could change those facts. Within 3 days, a primary challenger emerged from within Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. A Somali-American military veteran named Abdurrahman Hassan who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and earned a Bronze Star. He announced his candidacy with a powerful, devastating message delivered from the steps of the Minnesota State Capitol. I served this country in uniform. I wore the American flag on my shoulder. I swore an oath to defend this nation, and I honored that oath on battlefields half a world away. I'm proud to be Somali-American. I celebrate my heritage. But I'm American first. Minnesota deserves representation that can answer yes when asked if they've honored their oath to America. Minnesota deserves a representative who doesn't plead the Fifth 37 times when asked about basic facts. Minnesota deserves better. His first-week fundraising totaled $6.2 million, shattering records for a House primary challenger. Small dollar donations poured in from across the country. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all united in wanting accountability. Polling in Omar's district showed her approval collapsing from 54% to 19% in 1 week, the fastest collapse in approval ratings ever recorded for a sitting House member. Even Democrats in her district had turned against her approval among her own party dropping from 72% to 31%. The sworn testimony had done what years of controversy, investigative journalism, and political opposition had failed to achieve. It forced her to admit things under oath she couldn't later deny. 1 week after the hearing, exactly 7 days, Omar held a press conference in Minneapolis. Small room, subdued lighting, no questions from reporters. She read from a prepared statement, her voice shaking, hands trembling slightly as she held the paper. After consultation with my family, my legal counsel, and deep personal reflection, I've decided to step away from Congress to focus on my family and to address the legal matters that have arisen from last week's Senate hearing. I'm proud of my service to Minnesota's 5th District. I'm proud of the progressive policies I've championed. I leave this office with my integrity intact and my commitment to social justice unshaken. I will not seek re-election, and I will resign my seat effective 30 days from today. The last line drew bitter, incredulous laughs from political observers watching the press conference. She pleaded the fifth 37 times and claimed intact integrity. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. The cultural and legal impact extended far beyond one congresswoman's destroyed career. Law schools across the country began using Kennedy's cross-examination as a teaching tool in trial advocacy courses. How to prepare witnesses for hostile examination. How to ask yes or no questions that eliminate wiggle room. How to use documentary evidence systematically. How to build a devastating case piece by piece. How to make the Fifth Amendment itself an admission of guilt. The Omar examination became a standard case study in effective cross-examination technique, studied by law students at Harvard, Yale, Stanford, every major law school in America. The phrase under oath gained new cultural significance and power. Conservatives began demanding that controversial politicians testify under oath about various scandals and allegations. Put them under oath like Kennedy did became a rallying cry, a demand for actual accountability rather than cable news debates. The difference between Twitter battles and sworn testimony became crystal clear to millions of Americans. C-SPAN viewership spiked dramatically. Americans discovered that actual congressional hearings, when conducted properly by prepared attorneys asking real questions with real consequences, were far more revealing and compelling than anything on cable news. Kennedy's methodical, relentless destruction of Omar's defenses showed what accountability looked like. Real accountability. Not partisan attacks, not media narratives, but legal, sworn, permanent accountability. 3 months after the hearing, the Department of Justice announced indictments. United States v. Ilhan Omar. Multiple counts of immigration fraud. The evidence Kennedy had methodically entered into the congressional record, the marriage certificates, the school records showing the same parents, the photographs from childhood, the social media posts, all combined with her 37 Fifth Amendment responses, gave prosecutors everything they needed. 6 months later, the IRS announced tax fraud charges related to improper joint filings. Multiple counts, multiple years. Again, Kennedy's hearing testimony provided the roadmap, the foundation, the evidence prosecutors needed. 1 year later, the Federal Election Commission announced the largest fine ever levied against a sitting member of Congress for campaign finance violations. $3.7 million. The $2.8 million paid to her husband's firm, examined under oath, had opened investigative doors that led to dozens of additional violations. Straw donors, illegal corporate contributions, personal use of campaign funds for family expenses, travel, even groceries. Kennedy himself rarely commented publicly on the hearing in the immediate aftermath, maintaining the professional distance of a senator who'd conducted constitutional oversight rather than a partisan warrior seeking credit or fame. But when he did speak about it, usually at Louisiana town halls or in brief interviews, His comments were characteristically modest and devastatingly effective. 3 weeks after the hearing, at a packed town hall in Baton Rouge, someone asked him about his preparation for the examination. Kennedy leaned back in his chair, that easy smile spreading across his face, and spoke in the slow drawl that masked one of the sharpest legal minds in Congress. "Well, I appreciate the question. I'm just a country lawyer from Louisiana, but one thing my daddy taught me, and my daddy was a smart man, smarter than me for sure. He taught me that if you're going to ask somebody questions under oath, you better have your facts straight. Because if you don't, they're going to make a fool out of you. And I don't much like being made a fool of." The audience laughed. Kennedy continued. "So when the committee decided we were going to have this hearing, I did what any lawyer does. I read everything I could find. Every document, every interview she'd ever given, every tweet, every Facebook post, every public statement, every ethics complaint, and I organized it all, made timelines, cross-referenced everything, and I thought about what questions needed asking, and I thought about what answers I might get, and I prepared for those answers." He paused, taking a sip of water from a bottle on the table. "Now turns out when you ask simple yes or no questions and people are under oath, one of three things happens. They tell the truth, they lie and commit perjury, or they plead the Fifth Amendment. She pleaded the Fifth 37 times. That was her choice. All I did was ask questions, questions that needed answers." Someone in the back shouted, "Were you surprised she took the Fifth so many times?" Kennedy's expression became more serious, the folksy mask slipping slightly to reveal the lawyer underneath. "Well, now let me tell you something about the Fifth Amendment. It's a crucial protection in our Constitution. One of the most important rights we have. Innocent people use it sometimes when prosecutors are overreaching or asking questions designed to trap them. But in here his voice became harder. When you plead the Fifth to the question, is the man you married your brother? When you plead the Fifth to did you commit immigration fraud? When you plead the Fifth to have you honored your oath to defend America? Well, where I come from, we have a saying. Innocent people don't need to plead the Fifth to 37 questions about basic facts of their life." He let that statement land, let it sink into the minds of everyone in that town hall. "But I'll let the American people draw their own conclusions. She was under oath. The testimony is permanent congressional record. Can't spin it, can't tweet it away. Can't delete it like she deleted those social media posts about her brother. Can't make it disappear. It just is what it is. And what it is a permanent record that federal prosecutors and investigators can use. That's all I was trying to do. Create a clear, undeniable record. And we did. This wasn't just another political controversy that would fade with the next news cycle. This wasn't another scandal that would disappear when something more dramatic happened. This was sworn congressional testimony that would exist in the permanent record forever. In the National Archives, in law school textbooks, in historical analyses of congressional oversight. Every time someone looked up Ilhan Omar's name, they'd find the hearing where she pleaded the Fifth 37 times. Every time someone researched immigration fraud cases, they'd find her case. Every time someone studied congressional oversight done correctly, they'd study this hearing. Senator John Kennedy didn't just debate her or argue with her or exchange sound bites with her on cable news. He cross-examined her under oath, with preparation, with documentation, with questions that had only two possible answers. Tell the truth or plead the Fifth. Admit facts or admit that admitting facts would incriminate you. She chose the Fifth 37 times, and each time she did, she admitted what she wouldn't say directly. That answering truthfully would incriminate her. That's what the Fifth Amendment means. Protection against self-incrimination. You only need protection from your own truthful testimony if that testimony would prove you committed crimes. Twitter clapbacks don't work under oath. Victim narratives don't work under oath. Accusations of Islamophobia don't work under oath. Crying racism doesn't work under oath. You have to answer yes or no. You have to tell the truth or plead the Fifth. There's no middle ground, no spinning, no deflecting. No hiding behind identity politics or media narratives or supportive tweets from celebrities. Just questions and answers, truth or admission of guilt by silence. And America watched. 178 million Americans watched as a sitting member of Congress pleaded the Fifth when asked if the man she married was her brother. Pleaded the Fifth when asked about tax fraud that Minnesota had already fined her for. pleaded the fifth when asked about campaign finance violations involving millions of dollars paid to her husband's firm while she was having an affair with him. Pleaded the fifth when asked if she'd honored her oath to defend America against the same terrorist organizations she'd made air quotes about. Those Fifth Amendment invocations, 37 of them, each one carefully documented in the permanent congressional record, combined with her sworn admissions that she minimized 9/11 as some people did something, that she spread anti-Semitism condemned twice by her own Democratic colleagues, that she rejected over $100,000 in aid for her own grandmother for purely political reasons, that she couldn't state definitively she'd honored her oath to defend the United States, all created a legal and political record that would follow her for the rest of her life. The hearing accomplished something years of news coverage, investigative journalism, political opposition, and social media campaigns had failed to achieve. It forced Ilhan Omar to answer questions under oath with all the legal weight and consequences that carries. She could no longer dismiss allegations as conspiracy theories. She could no longer call them racist attacks or Islamophobic persecution. She had to either confirm them, deny them under penalty of perjury, or invoke constitutional protection against self-incrimination. She chose the Fifth Amendment 37 times, and that choice, made under oath in a formal Senate hearing, told Americans everything they needed to know about the truth of the allegations she refused to answer. Kennedy proved something that had been forgotten in the age of social media and cable news talking points and partisan warfare. Accountability is still possible in American government. Real accountability, legal accountability, permanent accountability. But it requires more than viral tweets or cable news segments or investigative articles that people can dismiss as partisan attacks. It requires the formal power of congressional oversight exercised by prepared attorneys who understand how to create legal records that can't be spun away. It requires witnesses under oath where evasion becomes admission and lies become federal crimes. It requires exactly what Senator John Kennedy did. 3 weeks of meticulous preparation, organized evidence, strategic questioning, legal acumen to know which questions would force truth or admission of guilt by silence. The folksy Louisiana country lawyer routine was the delivery mechanism, the presentation, the style. But underneath it was a Rhodes Scholar's intellect, a trial lawyer's precision, a prosecutor's instinct, a senator's understanding of how to use congressional authority to create permanent accountability. 1 hearing, 4 hours, 37 Fifth Amendment invocations, multiple federal investigations, 1 forced resignation, 3 indictments, millions in fines, and a permanent reminder that in America, under the right circumstances, with the right preparation, even powerful politicians who think they're above accountability can be brought to account by simple questions. Will you answer truthfully under oath? Yes or no? If you think Congress should hold more hearings under oath, share this story. Comment accountability if you want to see more sworn testimony instead of cable news debates, because Kennedy proved what Americans instinctively knew but rarely saw. The truth comes out when you have to swear to tell it, when there are real consequences for lying, when evasion is documented, when silence becomes its own form of admission. And if you refuse to tell the truth, if you plead the fifth 37 times when asked about basic facts of your life, that tells us everything we need to know. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what someone says. It's what they refuse to say under oath.